Hey guys, and welcome back to another very exciting Star Wars news update. Today we have a triple whammy of Obi-Wan Kenobi news. We're going to be talking about an awesome Easter egg you might have missed, how a creative at Lucasfilm has exposed a problem we've been talking about with Disney Star Wars for years. But first, continuing on from what we were speaking about in my last video, another major reveal from the new Star Wars Encyclopedia. A new look at Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon's Force Ghost from the end of the first season. And a bit of a tease for a season 2 which Ewan McGregor has said Lucasfilm is trying to work out how they're going to do it. After Qui-Gon visits his former apprentice in Force Spirit, he teaches Obi-Wan how to connect with the cosmic force, how to become a Force Ghost, which as we know Obi-Wan is able to do by the time of A New Hope. Pretty exciting. So now, one of my favourite things to do is look at concept art from Star Wars shows and movies and compare them to the final product. Obi-Wan Kenobi is old news, but a piece of concept art from the first episode has emerged. It's the Organa gathering on Alderaan, and oh my goodness, this concept art is an absolute mishmash of Star Wars Easter eggs, just full of irrelevant characters, mainly to fill out the room, mainly to fill out the space. In the final product, of course, we did get 3PO and R2-D2 in this scene. But some of the unused concepts, which obviously I don't think Lucasfilm ever intended to throw in, are quite interesting. Let's take a look. On the left-hand side is that Grand Admiral Thrawn. It's clearly a Chiss, but it almost looks like a blue Director Krennic. And this character's wearing an Imperial Researcher uniform. What's he doing at Bail Organa's place? On the right-hand side, you can clearly see Sam Witwer as Starkiller, Vader's apprentice. And what in the world is a Polis Mason doing here? That is a fun callback to Revenge of the Sith. Not to mention an Abenido talking to, is that Holdo? And a Last Jedi Holdo at that. She would be closer to Leia's age. You also have a Resistance droid, far too early in the timeline. Like I said guys, this is just concept art. It was never meant to be taken seriously, but it's fun when you get Easter eggs like this. So here's a fun little tidbit. What would Thrawn have been up to during the events of the Kenobi show? Well, it's 9 BBY, and he was involved in the battle for Botayef. At this stage, Thrawn was Commodore Thrawn. Grand Moff Tarkin had been very impressed by the record of successes that Thrawn accomplished, and his string of unusually fast promotions. Thrawn was promoted from Commander to the rank of Commodore, and given command of the ISD Chimera. In 9 BBY, the planet Botayef was home to the Jeffy species, whose history was once characterized by long periods of passive allegiance, followed by brief periods of fiery conflict. After Palpatine's declaration of the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire, the world came under Imperial control. They appointed a certain Governor Questle to rule the planet. Now, while this governor was human, he managed to use his leadership skills to convince the Jeffy species to submit to his rule. But here's the thing. Governor Kessel betrayed the Empire and decided to secede the planet of Botayef from the regime. Obviously the Empire wouldn't accept this, and so they dispatched two very important figures to deal with this threat, Fleet Admiral Jock Donasius and Commodore Thrawn. One of the reasons Thrawn was assigned to this mission was because certain elements of the Imperial military despised the Chiss and privately wanted him to fail. But Thrawn's tactics were absolutely impeccable. He defused the uprising on Botayef without any bloodshed. Following the defeat of Governor Kessel, Thrawn took steps to inform the chief of the Botayef Defense Force about the real situation, that Governor Kessel used secession as an excuse to steal their artwork, which he wanted to sell on the black market and fake his death. This peaceful resolution and sound prowess was considered a big blow to those in the Empire who wanted to see Thrawn fail and discredit him as an outsider. But you can't underestimate him. You can't get rid of him that easy. So that is one of the major events that takes place alongside the Kenobi show. Now on the subject of Obi-Wan Kenobi, there is one aspect which doesn't get spoken about enough that truly missed the mark. George Lucas always said, Star Wars has to look lived in. The aesthetic, despite being in a galaxy far, far away, needs to feel authentic. There are some parts of the galaxy, such as some parts of Coruscant, which can look a bit more sparkly, but the lived-in aesthetic is very important. It's part of Lucas's retrofuturism. And at Star Wars Celebration in 2023, this is something Doug Chiang expressed. He of course is a legend at Lucasfilm, and he was the production designer for Obi-Wan Kenobi. And did you know, my dear friends, one of his original concepts and original ideas was scrapped by Lucasfilm. He plays it off as just a joke, but it's pretty depressing because you can tell there is some sincerity in his voice. So what am I talking about? He revealed that originally, in Leia's room on Alderaan, the aesthetic was much more befitting of a child's bedroom, representing aspects of Leia's personality, her intelligence, her passions, her hobbies, and her strengths. Here's the quote: "We filled her room with scientific toys and gadgets, gave her room rich patterns and textures, and a sense of sophistication for a little girl beyond her years," which by the way we know Leia was. The room needed to mirror her intellectual energy, and then the video cuts to an image of the final version of Leia's room in the show. And even though he makes a joke, this is after she cleaned it up, it's clear there was a real drastic change, a huge difference, between the team's original concepts and the final version. I've got to say, despite his more jovial approach, there is something to be said about the aesthetic in modern Star Wars projects, not just Obi-Wan Kenobi but also The Acolyte. When that show dropped, I talked about how the Jedi Temple just didn't feel the same as the grandiose, majestic, lived-in temple we see in the prequel trilogy. You would think with the budgets these shows get, they would at least get the look right. And if you understand the character of Leia, she's a strong-headed princess with a well-known personality. It would have been awesome seeing Leia's room designed with these personal touches, ones that represented Leia's brilliance, her curiosity, and her intellect. And if you want to say that she cleaned her room because of her parents, you would think Bail Organa would encourage his daughter's uniqueness, always encouraging her to be herself. And you know, this is a widespread problem. Star Wars TV shows just feel lifeless. They feel like a caricature of the soul and the life that George Lucas bred into the franchise. You can argue they feel controlled, somewhat cold, and it's not even the minimalism sometimes, it's just they felt more purposeful in the past. It's just harder to justify this austere design becoming a widespread standard across the modern franchise. Places that should feel lived in feel so subdued. I mean, compare it to Anakin's room. I understand that Tatooine is a different planet, but you instantly know it's Anakin's room. It reflects his interests, building things, fixing things. There is a life to it, a history, a childhood, despite him and his mother being a slave. There are ornaments and knickknacks that represent his personality, his individuality, and even though Leia grew up in much different circumstances, far more privileged, in the house of a much respected politician, you would still expect a child's bedroom to be a bit more inhabited and lively, not just a blank open space with a bed. I hate to bring it back to The Acolyte, but another really good example of this is the Jedi Temple on Olega. But there is hope, and a bit of good news, because I don't think Skeleton Crew is going to fall to the same fate. Skeleton Crew from the promos, from the trailers and the TV spots already looks much more lived in, much more grimy. We're dealing with smugglers and pirates, the dangerous side of the galaxy, so they kind of had to do that. The aesthetic had to match the plot, and they're going to use those planets to contrast the more cozy, middle-class life the children live back home. But with that said, my dear friends, I want to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, check me out on socials, and may the Force be with you, always.